Yukon is the westernmost and smallest of Canada's 3 federal territories. Whitehorse is the territorial capital and Yukon's only city. The territory was split from the Northwest Territories in 1898. Receiving royal assent on March 27, 2002, the federal government modernized the Yukon Act to confirm Yukon as the current standard, though Yukon Territory remains the more popular usage. Though officially bilingual, the Yukon Government also recognizes First Nations languages. At 5,959 am, Yukon's Mount Logan, in ʻjuːk̒n National Park and Reserve, is the highest mountain in Canada and the second highest on the North American continent. The territory's climate is Arctic in the north, subarctic in the central region, between north of Whitehorse and Old Crow, and has a humid continental climate in the far south, south of Whitehorse and in areas close to the British Columbia border. Several rivers run through Yukon, some being the Stewart River, Peel River, and the Yukon River, after which the territory was named. History. Long before the arrival of Europeans, central and northern Yukon was populated by First Nations people, and the area escaped glaciation. The volcanic eruption of Mount Churchill in approximately 800 AD in the U.S. state of Alaska blanketed southern Yukon with a layer of ash which can still be seen along the Klondike Highway and forms part of the oral tradition of First Nations peoples in Yukon and further south. Coastal and inland First Nations had extensive trading networks. European incursions into the area only began early in the 19th century with the fur trade, followed by missionaries and the Western Union Telegraph Expedition. By the 1870s and 1880s gold miners began to arrive. This drove a population increase that justified the establishment of a police force, just in time for the start of the Klondike Gold Rush in 1897. The increased population coming with the gold rush led to the separation of the Yukon District from the Northwest Territories and the formation of a separate Yukon Territory in 1898. Sites of archaeological significance in Yukon hold some of the earliest evidence of the presence of human occupation in North America. The sites safeguard the history of the first people and the earliest First Nations of the Yukon. More information is found in the Yukon Archaeology Program. Geography. The territory is the approximate shape of a right triangle, bordering the U.S. state of Alaska to the west for 1,210 km mostly along longitude 141° W, the Northwest Territories to the east and British Columbia to the south. Its northern coast is on the Beaufort Sea. Its ragged eastern boundary mostly follows the divide between the Yukon Basin and the Mackenzie River drainage basin to the east in the Mackenzie Mountains. Most of the territory is in the watershed of its namesake, the Yukon River. The southern Yukon is dotted with a large number of large, long and narrow glacier-fed alpine lakes, most of which flow into the Yukon River system. The larger lakes include Teslin Lake, Atlin Lake, Tagish Lake, Marsh Lake, Lake Laberge, Quazora Lake and ʻjuːk̒n Lake. Bennett Lake on the Klondike Gold Rush Trail is a lake flowing into Nez Lake, with the greater part of its area within Yukon. Canada's highest point, Mount Logan, is in the territory's southwest. Mount Logan and a large part of the Yukon's southwest are in ʻjuːk̒n National Park and Reserve, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Other national parks include Avavik National Park and Vuntard National Park in the north. Other watersheds include the Mackenzie River, the Peel Watershed and the Alsika-Euro-Tachinchini, and a number of rivers flowing directly into the Beaufort Sea. The two main Yukon rivers flowing into the Mackenzie in the Northwest Territories are the Liard River in the southeast and the Peel River and its tributaries in the northeast. Notable widespread tree species within Yukon are the black spruce and white spruce. Many trees are stunted because of the short growing season and severe climate. The capital, Whitehorse, is also the largest city, with about 2/3 of the population. The second largest is Dawson City, which was the capital until 1952. Climate. Demographics. In the 2011 census, Yukon had a population of 33,897 living in 14,117 of his 16,259 total dwellings, an 11.6% change from its 2006 population of 30,372. With a land area of 474,712.64 km2, it had a population density of 0.1 per kilometre 2 in 2011. Municipalities by population. Ethnicity. The 2006 Canadian census examined Canadians' ethnicity and ancestry. Out of a Yukon population of 30,195, only 13,045 responded with a single answer. 57% of respondents selected multiple ethnicity, making a simple assessment of the ethnic portrait impossible. From the total answers, 13% are of Aboriginal, North American Indian, or Macopitis origin. This percentage might be a little higher if the Canadian origin includes both First Nations people and European descendants. The categories for other origins are confounding, and therefore a further breakdown is not realistic. According to the Statistics Canada 2006 Community Profiles page, Yukoners of Aboriginal identity population represent 25% of the population. Language, religion. The largest denominations by number of adherents according to the 2001 census were the Roman Catholic Church with 5,975. The Anglican Church of Canada with 3,795. And the United Church of Canada with 2,105. 37.4% of residents claimed no religion. Economy. Yukon's historical major industry has been mining. The government acquired the land from the Hudson's Bay Company in 1870 and split it from the Northwest Territories in 1898 to fill the need for local government created by the population influx of the gold rush. Thousands of these prospectors flooded the territory, creating a colorful period recorded by authors such as Robert W. Service and Jack London. The memory of this period and the early days of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, as well as the territory's scenic wonders and outdoor recreation opportunities, makes tourism the second most important industry. Manufacturing, including furniture, clothing, and handicrafts, follows in importance, along with hydroelectricity. The traditional industries of the trapping and fishing have declined. Today, the government sector is by far the biggest employer in the territory, directly employing approximately 5,000 out of a labor force of 12,500. Tourism. Yukon's tourism motto is larger than life. Yukon's major appeal is its nearly pristine nature. Tourism relies heavily on this, and there are many organized outfitters and guides available to hunters and anglers and nature lovers of all sorts. Sports enthusiasts can paddle lakes and rivers with canoes and kayaks, ride or walk trails, ski or snowboard in an organized setting, or access the backcountry by air or snowmobile, climb the highest peaks in Canada, or take a family hike up smaller mountains, or try ice climbing and dog sledding. Yukon also has a wide array of cultural and sporting events and infrastructures that attract artists, participants and tourists from all parts of the world. Yukon International Storytelling Festival, Frostbite Music Festival, Dawson Music Festival, Yukon Quest, Sourdough Rendezvous, the Yukon Baringa Interpretive Center, Northern Lights Center, Klondike Gold Rush Memorials and Activities, Takini Hot Springs, and the Whitehorse Fish Ladder. There are many opportunities to experience pre-colonial lifestyles by learning about Yukon's First Nations. Wildlife and nature observation is exceptional, and a wide variety of large mammals, birds, and fish are easily accessible, whether or not within Yukon's many territorial parks and national parks and reserves, or nearby Liard River Hot Springs Provincial Park in British Columbia. The latitude enables the view of Aurora Borealis in Yukon. Arts and culture. Although English is the main language used in the territory, as evidenced by the census, the government of Yukon recognizes several Aboriginal languages as part of the cultural heritage of the territory, the Tlingit, and the less common Tahltan, as well as 7 Athabaskan languages, Upper Tanana, Gwich'in, Ha-Currency-N, Northern Tук'ch'n, Southern Tук'ch'n, Kaska and Tagish, some of which are rare. As noted above, the Aboriginal identity population makes up a relatively small part of the total population, accounting for about 25%. Notwithstanding, the Aboriginal culture is strongly reflected in such areas as winter sports, as in the Yukon Quest sled dog race. the modern comic book character Yukon ʻjuːk̒n depicts a heroic Aboriginal persona. By far the strongest cultural and tourism aspect of Yukon, however, is the legacy of the Klondike Gold Rush, which inspired such contemporary writers at the time as Robert W. Service, Jack London and Jules Verne, and which continues to inspire films and games from Mae West's Klondike Annie to the Yukon Trail. Notable residents have included Leslie Nielsen, Eric Nielsen and Pierre Berton. Government. In the 19th century, Yukon was a segment of Northwestern Territory that was administered by the Hudson's Bay Company, and then of the Northwest Territories administered by the federal Canadian government. It only obtained a recognizable local government in 1895 when it became a separate district of the Northwest Territories. In 1898, it was made a separate territory with its own commissioner and an appointed territorial council. Prior to 1979, the territory was administered by the commissioner who was appointed by the Federal Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development. The commissioner had a role in appointing the territory's executive council, served as chair, and had a day-to-day role in governing the territory. The elected territorial council had a purely advisory role. In 1979, a significant degree of power was devolved from the commissioner and the federal government to the territorial legislature which, in that year, adopted a party system of responsible government. This change was accomplished through a letter from J. Keep, the Minister of Indian Affairs and Northern Development, rather than through formal legislation. In preparation for responsible government, political parties were organized and ran candidates to the Yukon Legislative Assembly for the first time in 1978. The Progressive Conservatives won these elections and formed the first party government of Yukon in January 1979. The Yukon New Democratic Party formed the government from 1985 to 1992 under Tony Bennett and again from 1996 under Piers MacDonald until being defeated in 2000. The Conservatives returned to power in 1992 under John Ostashk after having renamed themselves the Yukon Party. The Liberal government of Pat Duncan was defeated in elections in November 2002, with Dennis Fentie of the Yukon Party forming the government as premier. The Yukon Act, passed on April 1, 2003, formalized the powers of the Yukon government and devolved additional powers to the territorial government. As of 2003, other than criminal prosecutions, the Yukon government has much of the same powers as provincial governments, and the other two territories are looking to obtaining the same powers. Today the role of commissioner is analogous to that of a provincial lieutenant governor. However, unlike lieutenant governors, commissioners are not formal representatives of the Queen but are employees of the federal government. Although there has been discussion in the past about Yukon becoming Canada's 11th province, it is generally felt that its population base is too sparse for this to occur at present. At the federal level, the territory is presently represented in the Parliament of Canada by a single Member of Parliament and one Senator. Members of Parliament from Canadian territories are full and equal voting representatives, and residents of the territory enjoy the same rights as other Canadian citizens. One Yukon Member of Parliament, Eric Nielsen, was the Deputy Prime Minister under the government of Brian Mulroney, while another, Audrey McLaughlin, was the leader of the federal New Democratic Party. Federal representation. In the Canadian House of Commons, Yukon is represented by Ryan Leaf of the Conservative Party. Leaf was first elected to the House of Commons in 2011. Previous members of Parliament include Larry Bagnall, Louise Hardy, 1997 2000, Audrey McLaughlin, Eric Nielsen, James Aubrey Simmons. Yukon is allocated one Senate of Canada seat and has been represented by 3 senators since the position was created in 1975. The Senate position is currently held by Daniel Lang, who was appointed on December 22, 2008. It was previously filled by Ian Christensen, of the Liberal Party. Appointed to the Senate in 1999 by Prime Minister Jean Croix. Copyright 10. Christensen resigned in December 2006 to help her ailing husband. From 1975 to 1999, Paul Lucier served as Senator for Yukon. Lucier was appointed by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. First Nations, infrastructure. Before modern forms of transportation, The rivers and mountain passes were the main transportation routes for the coastal Tlingit people trading with the Athabascans, of which the Chilkoot Pass and Dalton Trail, as well as the first Europeans. From the gold rush until the 1950s, riverboats plied the Yukon River, mostly between Whitehorse and Dawson City, with some making their way further to Alaska and over to the Bering Sea, and other tributaries of Yukon River such as the Stewart River. Most of the riverboats were owned by the British Yukon Navigation Company, an arm of the White Pass and Yukon Route, which also operated a narrow-gauge railway between Skagway, Alaska, and Whitehorse. The railway ceased operation in the 1980s with the first closure of the Faro mine. It is now run during the summer months for the tourism season, with operations as far as Carcross. Today, major land routes include the Alaska Highway, the Klondike Highway, the Haines Highway, and the Dempster Highway, all paved except for the Dempster. Other highways with less traffic include the Robert Campbell Highway linking Carmacks to Watson Lake via Faro and Ross River, and the Silver Trail linking the old silver mining communities of Mayo, Elsa and Keno City to the Klondike Highway at the Stewart River Bridge. Air travel is the only way to reach the far north community of Old Crow. Whitehorse International Airport serves as the air transport infrastructure hub, with direct flights to Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Fairbanks, and Frankfurt. Every Yukon community is served by an airport. The communities of Dawson City, Old Crow, and Inuvik have regular passenger service through Air North. Air charter businesses exist primarily to serve the tourism and mining exploration industries. See also: Canada, Outline of Canada, Index of Canada-related articles, Bibliography of Canada, Canada at Wikipedia Books. History of the West Coast of North America, Peel Watershed, Yukon College, Yukon Energy Corporation, Yukon Field Force, Yukon Members of Parliament, Yukon Quest. References. Further reading. External links: Yukon Government, Yukon at DMOZ, Yukon Attraction and Service Guides, Immigration Yukon, Digital Collections, Libraries, University of Washington. Territorial Battles, Yukon Elections, 1978 to Euro 2002, Digital Archives, CBCA.